nature was a relief after all the tension earlier. Thanks, Andy. No problemo, Nick. Before she could continue, Triton raised his hands into the air, and behind him, the huge white wall hiding the first trial split open and parted for us. It was a tremendous steel and cement room with overhead windows beaming down rays of sunlight. White walls ran a maze that hid a large portion of what seemed to be an obstacle course built in hell. There were several versions of the same woman running through it, testing various traps and gadgetry. One of the copies leapt across a chasm which released a giant fireball that roared into the air, painting Triton in a brilliant orange hue. Gemma left his side and began the course herself. She joined a copy of the woman already running, and the two chatted in friendly tones, careless of the imminent danger. "Shit," Andy whispered. Her mouth was open in wonder, but her brown eyes lacked even a drop of fear. Rather, she looked hungry. Very hungry. I had to agree. Triton's voice boomed over the excited buzz.
"This course is designed to test those with physical powers."
Someone nearby whispered that they were going to die, and I rolled my eyes.
"Those with mental powers will be taking a different test. If your specialty is a mental ability, please take the door on the left."
He gestured, and the crowd split, as dozens of students followed his direction. After they'd parted, Triton held up what seemed to be a featureless black bracelet.
"Attacking your future classmates is absolutely forbidden. Each of you will be wearing one of these to ensure that there is no interference."
His eyes lingered on the Barber twins. It would seem he was aware of the rumors that had been circulating the crowd. The two, a blonde boy and a girl, looked back with steady gazes.
"Should any of you decide to ignore my warning, not only will the band knock you unconscious, but you will be disqualified from the trials immediately."
The bracelets were passed around, and I slipped mine on without a fuss. Andy did the same without even bothering to look at it twice. I couldn't find any hint of technology or magic in the bracelet. In fact, it looked and felt like simple black metal, and I wondered if maybe the thing was a placebo. Hell, for all I knew, it could have been a test to determine obedience. I tried taking it off again, but the bracelet suddenly tightened. I jerked in surprise and instinctively pulled on it harder, and as I did, I saw others doing the same.
"They will be removed later on,"
Triton cut in tiredly. He raised a hand for silence, and it took a moment for the crowd to follow.
"You will enter the course in assigned groups. Each of you will be given a hindrance based on your abilities. You will obey the hindrance or be disqualified."
It seemed that Gemma left the course early because she reappeared a moment later from a hidden doorway and began fitting applicants with various gadgetry. The first group flooded into the entrance, and I noted their looks of surprise right before passing out of view. I lost sight of Andy, who was called by one of the copied women and fitted with a hindrance of her own. Gemma made her way to me, and she smiled in warm greeting. I bowed low to her, trying to be formal.
"Amazoness, it's an honor." "You can call me Gemma here, Nick,"
she scoffed, though her smile never wavered.
"I'm not a stranger."
And indeed, she wasn't.
"You're right."
I put my hands on my hips and looked her up and down with mock arrogance. "So, what'll it be? Hands behind my back? Am I going in one-legged? Blindfolded, maybe?"
"No."
She shook her head.
"You're not to use your powers. You're going in mortal, I'm afraid. Won't be a problem, will it?"
I could fly through the course at the speed of sound, but considering the fact that my powers were especially draining, I had trained hard not to rely on them. Gemma knew that too, since she'd made it a point to keep in contact after rescuing me from that island. I smiled back and bobbed my head. "Of course not," I told her as I waved a carefree hand. I hope you brought the super glue because I'm going to smash that record to pieces. Gemma grinned and clapped me on the shoulder. That's the spirit. Go get him, Nick. And I did. I gathered with the other applicants when my group was called and whistled at the sight that greeted me. The first part of the course was a wide chasm with a fairly steep drop. At the bottom, flames crackled menacingly, and I couldn't help but think of my father's namesake. Obviously, none of the applicants here would be burned alive, but I had memories of others suffering that fate. Those flames were bright, and the heat from them felt real enough. They were likely the source of that earlier fireball. An orange glow painted the whole area, and I looked from the fire to the hooks on the walls. They were set for climbing across the chasm, for those that couldn't fly or leap long distances. How the holy heck am I supposed to... Oh my god, it's you! An incredibly perky voice cried out next to me and broke me out of my thoughts. Lord Inferno's son! Hey, what's your power set? Is it fire? Ice? Just curious. I mean, you're you, so I bet it's something awesome. I can't believe you're here with me. I'm Eric, by the way. I turned toward the source of the rush of words to find that Eric had one arm bound tightly behind his back, and had thrust his only free hand at me. I took his hand, and he shook it very enthusiastically, then pulled away and looked down at his own in amazement. I just shook hands with a Gadion! Wow! He grinned from ear to ear. That's so cool! Nice meeting you, I said with a smile. Good luck on the course. I'm like your biggest fan, he continued. Seriously. Eric was shorter and younger than most of the others I'd seen here. He had messy blonde hair streaked with blue and bounced on his feet with a strange, frenetic energy. My biggest fan? I asked, a bit confused. I haven't even done anything yet. Yeah, but you will, he nodded emphatically. You're a Gadion. Duh. He smirked as a large number 10 appeared out of thin air in front of us and began to count down. In fact, I bet you completely aced this test. He bounded on his heels once more. I can't believe I get to take it alongside you. I'll get to witness your greatness firsthand. He spread his arms wide. I will get to say I was there at this moment forever. He grinned again, and I couldn't help but feel excited at his words. He was right. This was my opportunity to show the world what I was made of, and I was damn sure going to do it. I turned my attention back toward the numbers and waited. Just a few more seconds. The horn to start roared overhead, so I jumped for the nearest wall hook. As I swung swiftly across the chasm, a fireball zipped past me so close that the heat of it stung at my back. I could hear the others swearing and following suit, but they weren't as fast as I was, and I could tell many of them were too nervous to cross. Go, Nick! Eric cried from the platform, and when I looked back, I saw him giving me a huge thumbs up. I turned my attention back to the course, spotted the next hook, and planned my next move. I swung my body so I could build up some momentum, and as my body arced through the air, I released my hold on the hook. I sailed briefly over the pit of flaming death as I reached out toward the next hook and grabbed a hold of it. The impact jerked down my arm, but I forced the pain down as my momentum pulled me forward. Once again, I used my body's swaying to build up speed, because the next hook was even farther away. Worse, my grip was starting to weaken from holding myself up there, so I knew I had to hurry. This time, when I swung myself forward with all my might and launched myself forward, I angled my body so that when I grabbed the next hook, I conserved nearly all my momentum and used it to supercharge my next swing. A moment later, I cleared 3 more hooks and was on the other side. I took a quick second to catch my breath before I raced through the doorway at the end of the platform, only to be met with the gun barrel of some kind of killer robot. It was squat and mechanical, with a hoverjet underneath its body keeping it suspended in the air. It beeped an angry warning and then started firing lasers right at me. The joke was on it, though. While I should have been afraid of the machine, a stupid amount of my training over the years had been with BattleBots just like this. I moved too fast for the laser fire to catch me, and it felt good to have my years of training finally being put to real use. I took off down the hallway and vaulted over the first wall I found. And as I dropped down on the other side, I realized the wall directly in front of me was even higher than the last one, and the one behind it was taller still. That was when I realized how this obstacle worked. You had to scale each wall while the robot shot at you. Or did you? A smirk crossed my lips as I hauled myself on top of the wall, then cat jumped from one to the other as I rose so high in the air that I knew the fall would probably kill ordinary people on a misstep. Kill me for certain. Still, I had long learned to be graceful, and heights were the least of my fears at that moment. I bounced from one to the next easily, until they stopped at a wall too tall to leap to the top of in a single bound. Fuck it. Since I was in the middle of the hallway, I turned and ran toward the wall on my left. The laser fire chased me, melting holes in the wall beneath me as I leapt toward the wall and kicked off it toward the next wall blocking my path. My hands barely reached the top, and as I held on with my fingers, a laser blast singed the spot where I'd started my leap. I didn't have much time left, so, muscles screaming, I scrambled up. With the floor easily 20 to 30 feet below, part of me worried that the robot would just blow the wall to pieces to get to me. But, thankfully, the other side was only a 6-foot drop. As I dropped down behind it, I took a quick breath to recover, before I looked around and saw a brick wall coming straight at me. No, not a wall. Someone who looked to be made out of bricks. He saw me and jabbed a thick brick finger in my direction.
"Stay away,"
the walking brick wall warned.
"You ain't stopping me with your stupid tricks. I'm on to you."
My first instinct was to have pity for him despite his immediate hostility. He was probably power-locked into that form. Some woman made out of fog floated over the wall from behind me and brushed by the brickman with a waggle of her ghostly finger. "Attacking is against the rules, Jack. You'll be disqualified."
"Shut up, Eliana."
The fog woman floated by the two of us as she ignored the casual heat the brickman thrust in her direction. I did the same and focused on the next obstacle. It was another steep drop, this one much bigger and very deadly if I fell, and it seemed the only safe way down was a zip line. I didn't have anything to use to slide down it without tearing my hands to shreds, and they hadn't offered a hook. So I tore at the sleeve of my outfit and folded it over to create a makeshift rope. It was going to tear badly, but I only had to make it to the bottom. Eliana simply glided off the platform in her current fog form and kept right on going. The man made of bricks, Jack, stepped off the platform as well and plummeted straight to the bottom with a loud crash. The impact shook the entire area and splattered brick and mortar everywhere. I looked over the edge, worried I'd just witnessed Jack's apparent suicide, but the bricks slowly began to reform and collect back together again. I let out a sigh of relief, and with a slow breath, I held the cloth over the line and leapt off. It took a lot of strength to hold on, and a lot of trust that the cloth wouldn't tear before I got to the end. It was a close thing. The weight and friction frayed it badly as I hurtled down the line, but it held together and I landed gracefully on the other side. Eliana and Jack were behind me now. I tossed the cloth aside and raced into the third area. I was met with a grid of red lasers set out in complex patterns that one clearly had to avoid. I wasn't sure the cost in touching them, but given the earlier death bot, it was likely to be a nasty surprise. The Barber twins were already in the middle of it and bent carefully to avoid the lines. The girl was blindfolded, and the two of them were bound together by a long, thin chain. The guy who glared a hole into me earlier noticed me at the entrance and grunted something to his sister. She whispered back, and the two crawled together under their last laser line. From what I could tell from the thin holes they peeked from, these were likely just laser tripwires, as I could see a second barrel in each hole. That attached weapon wasn't likely to be deadly, or so I hoped. Probably tranks. The instructors weren't actually going to threaten anyone's life, were they? But then again, real fire, real falling hazards, and real killer robots. I hadn't heard of anyone dying in these courses, but that didn't mean it never happened. The twins high-fived their victory, and then the boy waved his arm sarcastically from the other side of the grid.
"Say hi to your mom for me, Inferno boy."
Before I could say anything back, I heard metal groan in protest. With a loud set of snaps, something gave way inside of the walls, and the guns all turned at once. The lasers swerved in my direction, determined to kill me. Apparently, the twins had found some way to break the mountings holding the guns in place. I immediately rolled forward to dodge a majority of them and ran for the exit. A loud bang rang out in a small space, and while one bullet grazed my shoulder, I dodged the rest of the barrage and kept moving forward as I bit back the pain. The boy cackled like a true supervillain, and his sister followed behind him, a strange twist in her lips that betrayed some unhappiness. Once the two vanished from behind the next door, the guns halted again. The lasers were all askew behind me, and their gun barrels smoked from use. I checked my shoulder with a palm and hissed. No bleeding, so the bullets weren't real. The pain was harder to explain. Maybe it was some kind of psychic weapon at work, but knowing that I wasn't actually injured was half the battle. The way forward was clear now, so I ran on and met the twins on the other side. The sister was pulling on the chain that held she and her brother together, and while her eyes were blindfolded, it was clear that she was furious.
Y ellos les empatamos. Ayer, ¿no? Porque hoy jugó su... Bien, tú me vamos a jugando a gusto. Cuatro, no sé si ganar. Es cierto, nos anotas tu gol. Yo no les anoté gol. ¿Es cierto? ¿A qué sí yo? Ahora van a meter el gol. Sí, cierto, que me atacaste a la muchacha. A la muchacha. ¿Sí? Dale 2 minutos de tiempo.
¿Quieres correr?
¡Eh!
¡Corre! Ya que mis compañeros ahí en la madera, a la pista.
¿Qué?
No, es que no.
Oh, los contenedores. Venga por mí,
Aquí no funciona más.
digan los contenedores. Pero venga pues por mí. Venga por mí, perros. Mira que hay grupos. ¿Le vienes a dar? No, ¿verdad?
Los rudos. Dame. No. Y me agarramos con mi botella de agua. Yo no la agarré. Pero qué marca es la tablet. Dile de tu corazón.
Este mataron un Santi. ¿Bajo cuándo va? Mira, lleno. Quiero. Dos. Santi, tres.
Me bloquearon. Así conectar esa wifi en tu casa o algo así. Pero si te permite conectarla. Otro paso que me lo malo. No, tú pagas lo que me conecta. Me metiste, le borraste sin querer ¿qué fue lo que le pasó? No lo tenía.
Ya comenzaba. ¿Te digo cómo? Ah, sí. Ay, pues
No, pero quiero jugar ese.
ese.
Por ejemplo, quiero jugar ese. Pero ¿cómo me salgo para jugar una partida de esas?
Es que hay unas que son Amazon y esos que son Amazon tienen más.
Johnny, para empezar otra vez para que juegue otra partida. Para empezar otra partida él.
¿Cómo?
Ahí al botón de start, le pones abandonar partida.
¿Eh?
Mira,
The brother yanked the chain toward him instead and growled low in his throat. It sounded bestial, a guttural noise. When he spotted me, his lips pulled back and bared wolf-like fangs.
"You survived then, Inferno Boy?"
he snarled.
"What a wonder you are."
"Stop it, Matt," the sister shot back. "This isn't the fucking time. Keep it up and you're going to get us both DQ'd. So I was pissed. No surprise there. I had no idea what this bastard wanted from me, and nor what I'd done to cross him without even knowing his name. It was probably some fucking fallout from my father again, which wasn't fair in the least, but welcome to my life. He tried to kill me outright, and would have gotten away with it on a technicality, because he hadn't actually hit me. He hadn't known those guns were fake, not if I didn't. I wanted to return the favor. I wanted to break his body in 6 different places. The black bracelet was a tight reminder around my wrist, and I chose to keep my mouth shut while I studied the course. Matt apparently wasn't happy with my lack of reaction. No doubt he wanted to see me gone from the academy forever. The sister once again drew his attention when she grabbed at his shirt as she shouted, "Strap your balls on and let it go. We've got bigger problems right now." The brother retaliated with a snarl, but didn't strike. It'd be funny if she were stuck here, bound to her stupid unconscious brother, unable to proceed and win the tryouts because he was careless. Not that it mattered to me what they did, since I was going to pass no matter what. I let them argue as I hopped down into what seemed to be an arena full of killer robots, hell-bent on destroying humanity. There was yet another pit of death blocking the rope ladder to the end of the trials. This one was filled with green, bubbling acid, and the caustic smell of it burned at my lungs. Andy was nearby, holding her own against 4 of the angry robots. Her fists flew in crazy directions as her arms stretched, snapped back, and spun around like actual rubber. Some of the robots were firing bullets, and others were wielding clubs. She skillfully evaded the gunfire by stretching and pulling her body like taffy. But she was too slow to avoid the melee fighters, since her left leg was held in some kind of device that kept her from stretching it. One of the club-wielding robots whirred angrily as it lashed out at her shoulder. As the blow smacked her shoulder, her rubber body deformed, and while she winced, I could tell that her powers had mitigated most of the impact. She kicked it back with her good leg, which stretched outward to increase the force. Her foot hit the robot with a sound like a rubber band snapping, only 1,000,000 times louder. The robot flew backward, collided against the nearby wall, and exploded into furious sparks, probably vowing some kind of revenge, no doubt. As another robot came up behind her, I moved in to help, but she didn't need it. She grabbed hold of that one and twirled around in a pirouette to build up momentum. She tossed it out towards the acid, where it tumbled down and exploded like the first bot had. These ones couldn't fly, so the damage was rather spectacular. "Come on, you stupid hunks of metal," she cried, and then gave them the bring it gesture. "I can do this all day. In fact, I want to do this all day." The robots seemed so incensed by her rebellious nature that they largely ignored me. Since she clearly had it handled, I turned my attention back to the course and found a pressure plate near the edge of the platform. When I stepped on it, a bridge made of light appeared over the acid pit. "Won't work," Andy cried as she twisted her body around a robot, and then let her body spin back to normal, causing the robot to jet off the platform like a top. "The bridge disappears when you pull your foot off. I tried putting a few robots on them, but that didn't do it either." "Damn," I said as I lifted my foot and watched the bridge vanish. "Say, why didn't you stretch over it?" "There's some kind of power mitigation field in that pit that keeps me, from doing it," she replied as another robot fired at her. She dodged it easily before throwing herself at the robots trying to kill her, and I realized she was taking out her frustration on them. That meant I could focus on the task at hand, and as I put my foot back on the platform and caused the bridge to reappear, I realized I knew what to do. "You get across," I said as I gestured toward the bridge. "They'll follow you, and then I can open the pit out from underneath them once you're safe."
Wait, you're gonna help me? We're in competition, Nick. Not that I don't trust you, but...
"There's no rule against working together," I called back. Clearly, this one's meant to teach that lesson. "Get on the bridge. I won't drop you."
You promise?
"Yeah, I promise, Andy." "Time's ticking. Move it." I gestured at the bridge again. She grinned and then hobbled onto the bridge. She was apparently willing to place her life into my hands, without much debate on the matter. I wasn't sure anyone else in the building would do it, but apparently I'd put some kind of good impression on Andy, and she just winked at me as she stepped onto the bridge. The robots did indeed follow her, especially when she howled like a wolf and cat-called back to them. They whirred and beeped, their metal bodies shivering with rage as they stepped onto the bridge to chase her down. I held the plate until she was safe on the other side, and then let go. All the robots who'd chased her tumbled down into the acid pit, which embraced them with the tender care only extremely corrosive acid can bring. On the other side, she laughed and glanced up at the rope ladder to freedom. Clearly, for a moment, she considered leaving without me, but then she stepped on a plate on her side, and the bridge reappeared.
Come on, cutie.
She smiled as her eyes glistened under the lights overhead. I could see approval there, happy for the ally she'd gained.
Quick, before I change my mind.
I didn't hesitate. I sprinted across the bridge and joined Andy on the other side a moment later. She stepped off the plate, and a curse from behind me told me that the twins hadn't been far behind us. I glanced back to see Matt scrambling back from the bridge, and he flipped me off with a rude finger when he noticed my attention. I ignored the asshole and pointed to Andy's restricted leg with a concerned frown. "Can you make it up the ladder in that?"
Does a duck like grapes?
Andy snorted and hobbled toward it. She used both arms and her good leg to climb, apparently happy to prove her own independence. I followed underneath her, determined to catch her should she fall, but she didn't. We made it up easily enough, and she waited until I was by her side before glancing at the finish line. She smiled and took my hand. It was a warm feeling, a calm comfort. She eased the nervousness I felt right at the end. I said to Gemma that I'd break the record, but I worried I'd wasted too much time on the twins and the light bridge. I wanted to prove that I could do this. I wanted to be the best. I wanted to be better than he was. I was so tired of people like Matt blaming me for things I didn't even do.
You're a good sort, Nick,
Andy said as she met my eyes with a heated amber gaze. It was like she could read my mind. Maybe my insecurity was just that obvious.
Don't be so hard on yourself.
With that, we crossed the finish line together. Triton was on the other side of it, and he clapped enthusiastically like the world's proudest dad. Gemma was behind him, a smile on her face as she held up a chart. 5 minutes even, Triton said as he grinned from ear to ear. He gestured at the chart which displayed our names and the time. You beat your father and Icebringer's time back when they tried. The two of you are currently best in class.
Best in class? Cute and talented.
Andy howled in triumph and immediately pulled my shirt in for a quick kiss. My face turned crimson, but I kissed her back. Her lips tasted sweet, and as that thought entered my brain, Andy wrapped her arms around my neck and pulled me in deeper. From our right, I heard Gemma's throat clear. All right, that's enough. Go get a water bottle or 3. You're not done yet. Like ice sliding down my spine, I became aware of the world around me again. The heat of my face could probably start a fire. Andy laughed at it and pinched my cheek. That only made it worse, of course. Wait, I said as I met Gemma's eyes. We're not done yet? Of course not. She grinned back at me with a twinkle of mischief in her eyes. That was only the first trial, Gatian. Move it or lose it. Chapter 2. Her leg freed now that the power limits were off, Andy had her arm slung around my shoulder as we waited for the next stage to assemble. It was an easy, loving gesture, and one that I wasn't used to getting. It made my heart sing in ways that it hadn't in a long time. I poked her hand where it hung down over my shoulder and smiled back at her. You're a good partner, I said quietly. Strange, but good. Her laugh was the sound of sunshine. Strange, eh? Yeah, the best kind of strange. I hugged her with one arm and watched as the Barber twins crossed the finish line. Matt sneered in my direction, but I didn't care anymore. Andy slipped out from my half embrace and led me away from the finish line to grab the water bottles Gemma had mentioned. She tossed one in my direction and then unscrewed the cap of another to down the entire thing in one go. Little droplets slid down her throat as she went for it. When she finally pulled away, the bottle was empty. She sucked in a great big breath of air and then wiped her mouth with the back of her wrist. I was impressed. Thirsty? She laughed again. I unscrewed mine and took it a bit more slowly. We met eyes, and they held for a long time. Hers were these loving brown irises that seemed to see beauty in the simplest of things. And I had to wonder what else I'd learn in the days to come. Everyone who applied at the academy had a story, and it was clear, given her skill level, that she'd come here prepared for a fight. Why then had she attached herself so easily to me? I knew I had the skill, and it was true that I'd helped her cross the final bridge at great risk to myself. But most people, upon learning my name, assumed other things about my character. She did not. Why? She snickered at the blatant confusion on my face, and I couldn't help but smile at the sound of it. God, Nick, I don't know what's going on in that head of yours, but stop overthinking everything. I ducked my head in response, but the smile didn't waver. She was right, of course. No point in pushing away the one ally I had in this place because I wasn't used to a little affection. I was pulled out of my thoughts by a blaring horn and Gemma waving for attention. I realized that the others had finished the obstacle course. Eric was among them, as well as Eliana, who had gone back to her human form. Jack was speaking to the Barber twins, apparently content in their company. I was certain that I was the focus of their conversation, because they kept darting glances in my direction while they spoke in hushed tones. At least 60 applicants moaned in despair as they were led off the course and out of the academy. Their entire lives had been shattered, or so they believed. I hadn't realized the course would be so difficult for so many people, especially since most of them presumably had access to their powers. We all start somewhere, don't we? Andy tisked with pity as she watched them pass by. It's not like they can't try again next year. A few years ago, that would have been me, but it seemed like my hard work was paying off, and while I was proud to make it this far, I found myself excited to get to the next event. We will begin in only a few moments, Gemma said as she signaled to a tall, dark man next to her, and my jaw practically dropped when I saw him. He was City Master, an older hero that led the academy as well as taught many of the training courses. He could manipulate walls and city buildings effortlessly, and he was likely responsible for the earlier obstacle course. Rumor had it that a lot of the defense against Lord Inferno was in his hands, and that he safeguarded the entire city with his abilities. Given the ease with which he manipulated the course, I believed it. City Master didn't even look back as he parted the giant wall behind him and Gemma to reveal a tremendous arena. Skylights beamed down from above and brought all focus to the large golden pyramid at the center. 57 of you remain, Gemma said, loudly enough to pull our attention away from the pyramid. There is only enough room for 15 of you at the top. Now, half of you stand here on the left. She gestured, and Matt and his crew went to the left side of the arena. Other half on the right. I followed Andy's lead as we made our way down to the right side. On the way, I passed Eric, whose eyes lit up in recognition. He gestured as if to ask if he could join, and I knew better than to refuse allies with the battle to come, so I nodded. He grinned as if I'd just given him a winning lottery ticket. On the first horn, the left group will fight for the first tier, Gemma explained. On the second, the right group will join them. You will have 5 minutes to reach the second tier. Every 5 minutes after that, the horn will blare, and you will fight your way to the next tier. Anyone left behind on a previous tier for more than 1 minute will be disqualified. As she spoke, I felt an odd sensation on my wrist and realized that the black band was gone now. There had been no sound of it falling. It simply vanished. A hallucination, perhaps? Combat is allowed, the black-haired teacher continued. But any threats to your fellow applicants' lives will be swiftly dealt with. A hero arrests, a villain hurts. Remember that. I balled my fists at my sides and bounced a little as I realized this was going to be a long fight of endurance. Gemma said nothing about powers or hindrances, so now I had to calculate when best to use mine. Andy, you're on defense, I whispered as a plan began to form in my head. Eric, what's your power set? I zap things, he enthused. I'm zappy like Thundress. Remember her? She was my great aunt, led the battle against... Focus, Eric, I said with a smirk. How good are you? I mean, I can't control it, he shrugged. I try, but I'll learn then. Despite my worry at his inexperience, I kept my voice even and confident. You're on offense. For some reason, Eric was keen to impress me, because his grin got even wider. Excitable though he was, I was happy to see that he was more confident than nervous. We needed that if we were going to win. You got it, boss. He gave me a quick salute. Nothing will get by me. Sounds good. I took a deep breath. Andy, do you think you can handle defense? Shouldn't be a problem. She grinned at me. What about you? Well, that's the rub, I sighed. My power only works for 10 minutes at a time, so I'll try to conserve it until the end. I looked between them. While I can take care of myself, I'd prefer to act as a secondary defensive or offensive player and assist where needed as we push from tier to tier. Both Andy and Eric bobbed their heads in confirmation as the horn blared and the first group ran in. I watched Matt immediately bare wolf-like claws and start leaping on various applicants. He did enough damage and caused enough fear to send them screaming. Far above us, the bolts holding down a skylight groaned in distress, and then the whole thing tore off with a shower of sparks. It followed the Barber sister's extended hand, who warped the metal with her mind. She stretched the material until it was flat like a shield, and then used it to protect herself against the force beams of another applicant. Jack, caught between her and Matt, roared and tossed his brick-like body into the crowd, sending several applicants flying backward. A metal bender, a werewolf, and a man made of bricks, I muttered as I added this new data to my battle plan. Sounds like the start of an interesting joke, Andy said as she elbowed me lightly in the side. Or a boy band. Oh, wow, you're hilarious, Eric said between guffaws, and I couldn't help but smile. Thanks, I try, Andy said, and I could tell the two of them would become friends, assuming we could beat this trial. And I was determined to make that happen, so I watched our competition closely. They were well trained, and several seemed hungry to see me fail. The second horn roared overhead, and Matt and I met eyes as I raced in. He was on the other side of the pyramid, busy with at least 3 different contenders. From his expression, it was clear that he wanted to claw my heart out, but that would have to wait. We each had our own immediate problems. Andy's rubber arm stretched up from beside me and caught the foot of a flying applicant who was headed toward Eric with a rather mean kick. She twirled and sent the guy flying. As he collided with the golden steps of the pyramid, Eric's fingers lit up. With crazed blue eyes, he zapped 3 other applicants with a burst of chain lightning as he let out a cackle of glee. "It worked!" he cried before letting loose another blast of lightning that took down a pair of applicants that tried to soar past us. "I just had to do what you said and focus better, Nick." I didn't have time to respond because a fist came flying at my face. I caught it swiftly, and the woman it belonged to gawked, surprised by my reaction time. I kicked her backward, and she flopped into the body of another applicant who had tried to hit me with a laser beam. I dodged it, then clotheslined both of them, using my momentum to knock them both off the first-tier platform. Another applicant, water swirling over his body, sent a pressurized blast in Eric's direction, but Andy's body stretched out like a parachute and blocked the attack. Andy winced, but she wasn't seriously hurt. "Focus, damn it!" Sorry." Eric's fingers cracked with lightning, and he lifted his palm. At his command, a thick bolt of electricity came down from the ceiling and hit his opponent with full force. The water amplified the damage, and a scream rang out. Frankly, I was impressed. Eric claimed he couldn't control his abilities very well, but he was doing an okay job of it so far. I guess he just needed someone to believe in him. As focused as we were on combat, time passed quickly. The horn overhead rang out again, and the 3 of us fought our way to the second tier. Several hopefuls were left behind after the grace period, and when they tried to claw their way back up, a golden force field popped into existence behind us and prevented them from cheating. The force field rose with us, sliding into place and leaving even more frustrated applicants in its wake. We made it to the 3rd tier before Matt and I were back in close range of each other. He kept glaring my way only to get distracted by another powered combatant. But he dealt with his opposition swiftly and effectively. They were well trained, holding their own just as effectively as Andy, Eric, and me, with Kristen providing support with their makeshift shield, while Matt and Jack burst through the crowd like an unstoppable freight train. The distance between us grew smaller and smaller until we were glancing back at each other over a small crowd of fighters. Just as it looked like Matt and I would get our duel after all, a huge tornado of fire suddenly burst upward between Matt's crew and us. The volley of fire and air sent at least a dozen applicants flying high into the air. I heard someone scream that their arm was broken and another that they were on fire. A flyer zipped by and caught 2 before they kissed the hard golden steps face first. In the chaos, Matt and I made eye contact. He sneered in my direction before turning to deal with a different contender. I scanned the crowd and found the culprit behind the tornado, a small red-headed woman with a cocky grin who seemed more than delighted to watch the world burn. With an extended hand, she thrust the tornado my way when she spotted me. I rolled out of the way and Andy and Eric followed. It was one thing to throw out laser beams and water blasts, but I had a thing against reckless fire users. Call it a personal issue. "Let's take out Tornado Girl," I called out. "She's going to get someone killed if we don't stop her." "Right behind you," Andy grunted. Her body was stretched out like a balloon over the top of Eric and me, and took the brunt of damage meant for the 2 of us. Her arms had somehow made it halfway across the battlefield to punch some poor contender in the face, and then they swerved to wrap another in her rubbery arms like a thick cord, then knocked her victim and many others off the platform in the process. Meanwhile, a man made of metal rushed us, his hand a menacing-looking blade. He tried to stab Andy with it, but I hooked his elbow and then tossed him backward. He skidded on the golden steps, then panicked when the fire tornado rolled in over top of him. He flew up high into the air as the others had, and I felt the heat and wind of the storm trying to pull me up with him. I climbed up to the second tier, then raced down the line to get the reckless fire user away from Andy and Eric. The redhead's eyes squinted in irritation when I escaped her storm, and the tornado moved to follow my progress. I made it to Matt's side of the pyramid and then taunted the redhead with a curl of my finger as the tornado followed behind her. Given the way she'd focused on me, I knew it was personal.
Come on then. Tell me, what did I do this time? Your dad killed my uncle,
she shouted back as she jabbed a finger at me.
He joined Inferno's army after they took Odavale. Inferno killed him on a whim to make some stupid point.
I had sympathy for her loss, I really did, but I was tired of people blaming me for the crimes of another. If your uncle joined Inferno's army, then he was a traitor, I spat. I didn't totally believe that, but I wanted to make her so angry that she'd stop thinking, and she did. Her eyes grew hot and wide, and the tornado flew right at me. Unfortunately, she was in the way of its path, and it hit her first. She was hurled into the air by her own attack, flames trailing her path back down. The tornado fizzled out immediately, and she landed against the force field, motionless. Worried for her safety, I scrambled after her to make sure she wasn't seriously injured. Just as I was checking her pulse, an angry cry from behind me told me that Matt had finally noticed I was much closer now. I rolled to the side and just barely kept his claws going for my neck. They scraped against the golden steps with a high-pitched metal whine. I held up my arms to protect my head and sighed a little in irritation. Behind him, Kristen had molded her skylight into a giant metal bat and swung at 5 other contenders trying to take advantage of the distraction. Jack stuck a thick brick finger in my direction and roared,
"Kill him!"
"Oh, I'm not gonna kill him," Matt sneered. "I'm just gonna make sure he never walks again. That'll send a message." I rolled my eyes and crossed my arms, already tired with this pattern. "Wild guess, but is this about my dad again? You people are a broken record." Matt wasn't overly thrilled with my tone, and he narrowed his eyes.
"You don't even remember me, do you?"
"Should I?"
"Just like a fucking Gaddion to forget,"
he spat. He angrily slashed at the air with his hand, and beside him, Jack's bricks groaned threateningly as the monster of a man debated charging me.
"Our dad is Icebreaker, you prick. We were cousins once, until your father went fucking Fruit Loops and turned on his best friend."
Icebreaker. It wasn't a name that I was fond of hearing because it was a reminder of a time when my family was still whole. Icebreaker had been my dad's old partner, and the uncle who would send me on ridiculous adventures as a young boy. He played Santa Claus on Christmas and hid chocolates for Easter. A pleasant man with a loving smile who became distant after my mother's murder. Inferno tried hard to convert him and grant him a position in his empire, but Icebreaker was the stoic hero who never wavered in his duties. Legend said that he was never once tempted. I often wondered if that was true. My father took it personally when his best friend refused him. He and Icebreaker fought bloody battle after bloody battle for years, and I had no doubt that it cost the Barber twins their childhood. Odd that I didn't remember them. They were 3 years younger than me, and Matt had been this little squirt back then who hid behind his father's leg with a constant thumb in his mouth. He had wide, curious eyes and a tendency to cry when I scolded him for stealing my toys. Which made the sister Kristen. She had been a quiet little girl who preferred her notebook to people. I wondered why she was here instead of a prestigious writing school, but trusted Matt to deliver the answer.
"He killed my mother, Nick,"
he snarled, claws extended with the itch to murder me.
"This isn't about you. This is about sending a message to him."
His mother was a woman named Lila,
a shapeshifter. A sweet, soft woman who always came with lollipops and a smile. I'd only heard about it through news outlets and never dared to ask any details. It had been something about a warped attempt by my dad to make Icebringer understand his personal view of the world. Likely, my dad thought that by taking from Icebringer what had been taken from the two of us, Icebringer would convert and finally join his forces. This proved my father's insanity, of course, but I hated that it came from a place of mental illness and not outright depravity. It was a lot harder to fight my father when he was a victim of his own madness. It twisted my heart to remember his too wide, too desperate smile when we last spoke. He was convinced that I'd take up his mantle someday and was proud that I at least understood him. In some ways, I guess I did. I settled my legs into a loose stance and scanned Matt's body for weaknesses. Could go for his solar plexus, maybe strain one of his knees. He wouldn't expect me to go for his eyes. I'm sorry about Lila, so I'm asking you nicely, Matt, I warned. Back off. Kristen rolled her eyes and put a hand on her hip. Aw, he's so cute when he's all puffed up. Maybe I'd break his jaw. I'm not angry, I spat. You'll know when I'm angry. Matt twiddled his fingers in a mocking gesture. Ooh, spooky. The horn roared again, and I felt it thrum throughout my entire body. Matt and I both looked at the second platform. He probably thought I was going to try to roll past him, but I simply waited, even as the force field moved closer to block our progress. He held his claws out, and his lips pulled back into a snarl. Give up already, mama's boy? You know, just like she gave in to those, don't kill him. It was a mantra going in my head as the fury took me. His sheer fucking audacity. Don't kill him. Don't. I felt raw power explode within me and then burst outward in a wave of pure force. Matt, Kristen, Jack, and several other applicants were all knocked backward as I flew up high into the air and hovered there for a moment while I let the feeling of nigh unlimited power course through me. It was always a rush when I let the power take me, and so hard to keep it under control. I rode the wave of the power inside me and dove down to snatch Matt by his collar. Then I plowed us both into the second-tier platform so hard that it left an impression in the metal. I warned you, I growled, my voice deeper than before. Matt's eyes were wide, terrified, and utterly convinced that I was the devil himself. He coughed and blood painted his lips. While I wanted to do a lot more damage, I held back. As Gemma said, heroes arrest, villains hurt. You really are a monster, Matt uttered. I didn't pay that any heed as I threw him hard onto the steps again, but he recovered a little quicker this time and scrambled back to his feet. He swiped at me with his claws, but they slid right off my skin like he was striking at steel. I knocked him backward with a backhand that sent him flying and shook my head. I was trying to be gentle, but it was difficult. Stop it, I growled. I'm not my father. Stop trying to tell me that I am. I didn't ask for this, Matt. Behind me, the metal applicant from earlier tried to take advantage of the distraction and stab me with his bladed hand. It didn't pierce my skin. I slowly turned to look at him and then punched him so hard that he flew off the platform and bounced against the force field barrier. Matt looked from the crumpled heap of the metal applicant to me and then crossed his arms. Not your father, eh? I'm sorry about what he did to your family, I shot back as I widened my stance to be ready for the attacks I knew were coming. Hell, I'm sorry about what he did to Odavale, but that wasn't me. You've got to listen. I don't want to hurt you. Just try, Inferno boy. Matt rolled forward and went for my eyes this time. I blocked him with an arm and winced. At first, my skin resisted his claws, but with enough persistence, he managed to pierce it all the same. I felt blood flow out of the wound, saw it drip down my arm. Matt was rabid now, fangs bared like he was actually going to bite me. With a sigh, I tossed him backward again. It was as easy as breathing, and the claw marks he left on my skin, they'd healed instantly. Why won't you listen? It was hard not to be a little angry at him, and I focused that anger into a punch to a woman made of ice who tried to take advantage of the distraction between Matt and me to attack me. My fist smashed into her face hard enough that she cracked a little. As she stumbled backward and tumbled down the pyramid, Matt recovered again easily enough and slashed at the air in frustration. He was so angry that there were tears in his eyes. I had pity for him, really, even if he was a dick. Come on, Matt. I'm not my father, and you aren't yours. I smiled at him. We were cousins once. Maybe we could be again.
Never. My family trusted a Gadion once, and we'll never make that mistake again,
Matt shrieked.
Not now, not ever.
He leapt at me again, and we twisted together in a flurry of fists, kicks, claws, and madness. I learned very quickly that he had a healing factor, and it was because of this that I stopped being careful. To be honest, he'd already gone too far, and my patience was a fraying thread. My vision red. I focused the power through my eyes into lasers that burned a hole through his abdomen, and when he doubled over in pain, I punched a hole through his chest. He shrieked, but healed through it and then clawed at my face like an animal. I grabbed him with both hands and flew up high, then slammed him into the ground with a strong enough impact to dent the golden platform below us and shatter his back into a million pieces. I'd expected him to stay down with that one, but a moment later he was up again with a snarl, teeth bared to me like a rabid hound. He wouldn't stop, not for anything. Matt, for God's sake! I cried in exasperation. The horn blasted again to interrupt me. The final tier. The last battle. Matt tried to throw me down below, but I didn't budge. This just pissed him off even more, and he vibrated with rage as he jabbed a clawed finger at me, his eyes wild with hate.
You're not winning this, Nick, he roared. You don't belong at Valkav, and you'll never be a hero. The others might be fooled, but I know you. You're a Gadion. You'll turn someday, I know it. You're fucking evil. It's in your fucking blood.
I wasn't sure what else I could say to him, and it hurt to know that he'd never believe otherwise. We'd been cousins once. Distant, maybe, but I could still remember the look of joy on his face each Christmas, when his dad, dressed as Santa, burst into the warm Gadion household, bearing gifts for all the children. I could still remember Kristen asking me for a rhyme to one of her poems. I could remember all of us smiling, happy, and warm, content with a proper family for once. They'd been a part of it. It should have mattered. I lost my mother too, I said, as my voice trembled a little. I'm sorry, but it's not my fault. Kristen came up behind and swung hard with her makeshift metal bat. It hit me square on the back of the head, and I slowly turned to look at her. It's better for all of us if you just drop out, she muttered, and then hit me again. The metal bounced harmlessly off my face. Jack took his chance then and kicked me hard in the abdomen. I sighed and shook my head. You can't hurt me. Want a bet? Kristen snarled, and as she summoned more metal, I flicked the air between us, and the force of it was enough to send Kristen tumbling across the battlefield. Matt let out a howl of anguish and leapt at me. With cupped palms, I unleashed the raging energy in me in a different, more subtle fashion, a ray of blinding light. It should have taken down Matt, but Jack interposed himself in front of it. His bricks singed and flung out in various directions, but they quickly reassembled into the walking dick I knew him to be. Matt plowed into me a second later, and I heard the snapping of his bones as his shoulders shattered against my waist. Then I looked down at him and slammed one fist down on the small of his back with so much force he actually punched 3 feet into the metal floor. Unfortunately, I could already see him healing the damage. Kristen motioned to hit me again, but suddenly an elastic arm twisted around her body and flung her to the floor of the platform, and the giant metal bat clattered off the pyramid. Andy rolled into the chaos, her body shaped like a barrel, and then kicked Kristen for good measure while she stretched and contorted back to normal. Matt leapt at her, furious on behalf of his sister, but Andy stretched her body out of his way and then giggled when he missed her entirely. "You're being stupid," she said and waggled a finger at him. "You're no Icebringer, he's no Inferno. Stop being a bitch and get over it." Matt was not over it. He screamed in rage and then leapt at her again, but a sharp crack of lightning jolted him, and he fell to his knees with a sharp cry of pain. Eric came to my side and pumped his fist into the air. "Yeah, Nick Gaddion's my friend. We're all friends now. You don't mess with us because we're friends, buddies, best friends even. We'll beat you up, you jerk." I had to smile at that. Eric was excitable and ridiculous, but at least he was loyal. Andy and I met eyes, and then I smiled a little wider, this time for an entirely different reason. But I felt all the energy drain out of me. It was crazy how fast 10 minutes could pass in the thick of battle. I sank to my knees, and Andy rushed forward to catch me before I could fall. "Nick, what?"
"I'm alright," I slurred. It's normal. It happens. I'll be fine."
"You sure?" She didn't sound convinced as she hovered at my side.
"Yeah,
I tried to stand and then immediately fell back to my knees again when the world swam a little. I'd expended a lot of energy, apparently. A nap would be very, very nice, but there was no time for that now.
I'm good."
"Bullshit," Andy huffed. She held on to me while I tried to stand again, but this time I was able to hold my own. I balled my fists and held them out in front of me. Matt pounced yet again, and this time I was a little slow to dodge out of the way, and we tumbled together onto the floor. He tried to swipe at my face, but I caught his wrist and then twisted us both around, so I had his arm pinned behind his back. I used the leverage to threaten a break and muttered, "Stop it."
"Fuck you, Inferno boy,"
Matt snarled. "The name's Nick, and I said stop." I wrenched his arm hard enough to strain it, but not to break it. Even if he'd heal, I wanted to make a point, that even without my powers, I could keep him in check. Matt groaned in pain, and I released his wrist before kicking him across the platform to join his sister and their crony. The horn blasted its final plea, and just like that, the battle was done. Matt, Kristen, and Jack were all on the final platform, and so were we. I glanced around and saw that Eliana had also made it, as well as a few other familiar faces. Beside me, Eric hooted in victory. "Woohoo! Yeah, we did it! Team Nick all the way!" Andy took my hand and helped me back up. I swayed a little, in danger of falling again, but she held on firmly. We locked eyes. I was the first to look away. "Thanks for helping," I said to the floor. "I'm strong, but I can only use my power for a bit. And don't worry, I'll recover, just need a minute." "Nick, you did great." Andy snatched my chin and forced me to meet her eyes again. "If Matt and his sister can't see that and want to be